The rain began the moment Marcus spoke the words that shattered her world. Amara stood in the center of the ceremonial grounds, her swollen belly prominent beneath the traditional mating gown she'd worn with such hope just hours earlier. The white fabric clung to her skin as the first drops fell, cold and accusatory. Around her, 200 members of the Silver Moon Pack watched in absolute silence, their eyes gleaming in the torchlight like coins at the bottom of a well, distant, unreachable, reflecting nothing back to her but her own desperation. I, Alpha Marcus of the Silver Moon Pack, reject you, Amara Vale, as my mate and Luna. His voice carried across the grounds with the particular resonance of an alpha command, each word a physical blow that made her knees buckle. She caught herself, one hand instinctively protecting her belly, feeling their daughter move inside her as if the baby could sense her mother's anguish. Marcus stood on the raised platform where they'd pledged themselves to each other 8 months ago, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the elegant she-wolf beside him, Celeste, daughter of the Northern Coalition's Alpha, whose dowry included 3 territories and a peace treaty Marcus wanted more than he'd ever wanted Amara. The mate bond between them, that golden thread she'd felt since the moment they'd first touched, began to fray. The sensation was unlike anything she could have imagined. Not a clean break, but a slow unraveling, like her soul was being pulled apart fiber by fiber. She gasped, pressing her hand to her chest, where the pain centered itself like a burning coal. Marcus. His name escaped her lips as a plea, and she hated herself for it. The baby. Will be provided for, he interrupted, still not meeting her eyes. I'm not a monster, Amara. The child will have a place here, a title and education befitting an alpha's daughter. But you... Finally, he looked at her, and the indifference in his gaze was worse than hatred. You were a mistake, a moment of weakness. The pack needs strength, not sentiment. Thunder rolled overhead, and the rain intensified until it came down in sheets, soaking through everything. Amara's dark hair plastered itself to her face and neck. She could feel the pack's eyes on her, some sympathetic, most carefully neutral, a few openly hostile. Celeste's friends had been whispering for weeks that Amara was too low-born, too plain, too unremarkable to be Luna of a pack as prestigious as Silvermoon. They'd been right, apparently. Accept the rejection. Marcus's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The proper response rose automatically to her lips, drilled into every wolf from childhood. I accept your rejection. 4 words that would sever the bond completely, that would free him to take Celeste as his mate without the complication of an existing bond. 4 words that would render Amara packless, mateless, nothing. She couldn't say them. Instead, she turned and ran. Behind her, she heard Marcus call her name once, but he didn't follow. Of course he didn't. He'd already moved on to his glittering future, to his politically advantageous mate, to the vision of leadership that apparently didn't include the woman carrying his child. Amara's feet carried her past the ceremonial grounds, past the pack houses with their warm lights and the lives continuing inside them, past the boundary markers that separated the heart of Silvermoon territory from the borderlands. She should have stopped there. Every wolf knew the borderlands were forbidden, the strip of unclaimed forest between Silvermoon and Bloodstone territories where both packs had fought and died for generations. Crossing into that no-man's land was exile. It was death. She kept running. The forest swallowed her whole. Rain hammered through the canopy, and lightning illuminated the twisted trees in stark flashes of white. Her thin ceremonial slippers provided no protection from the rocks and roots that tore at her feet. Branches caught at her gown, ripping the delicate fabric, scratching her arms and face. Her pregnant belly threw off her balance, making her stumble repeatedly, but terror and heartbreak drove her forward. She didn't know how long she ran. Time became meaningless, measured only in the burning of her lungs and the relentless pain in her chest where the bond continued its slow dissolution. When the first contraction hit, she initially mistook it for just another wave of emotional agony. The second one, minutes later, made her cry out and grab for a tree trunk to steady herself. No, not now, not here. But her body had other plans. The stress, the rejection, the desperate flight through hostile territory, it all conspired to bring her daughter into the world weeks before she was due. Amara sank to her knees in the mud, rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "Please," she whispered to the storm, to the forest, to whatever gods might be listening. "Please, not like this." Another contraction seized her, and this time she screamed. The sound was swallowed by thunder, lost in the howling wind. She was completely alone, about to give birth in the most dangerous place their world had to offer, rejected and packless and dying. She could feel death approaching like a cold tide, patient and inevitable. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was the sound of voices, deep, male, speaking in the clipped accent of the Bloodstone pack. Enemy voices. Then nothing. Consciousness returned slowly, bringing with it sensations that made no sense. Softness beneath her body. Warmth. The smell of lavender and clean linen. Amara's eyes fluttered open to find herself in a bed. Not just any bed, but one fit for royalty, with a carved headboard depicting wolves running beneath a full moon, and silk sheets that whispered against her skin as she moved. She sat up with a gasp, and pain lanced through her abdomen, sharp and immediate. Her hand flew to her belly, finding it smaller, softer, empty. Panic exploded in her chest. "Your daughter is here." The voice came from beside the bed, low and feminine. Amara turned to see a bassinet she hadn't noticed, and in it, wrapped in soft blankets, was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Her baby, alive, perfect, sleeping peacefully with tiny fists curled beneath her chin. "She's healthy," the woman continued, and Amara finally looked at her properly. She was older, perhaps 50, with silver threading through her dark hair and the confident bearing of a healer. Small but strong. She has her mother's fighting spirit, I think, to survive such a birth. "Where?" Amara's voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. "Where am I?" "Bloodstone Fortress." The healer said it simply, as if she hadn't just announced that Amara was in the heart of enemy territory. "Our scouts found you in the borderlands during the storm. You were in labor, unconscious, dying." She moved to check Amara's pulse, her touch professional and gentle. "We almost didn't reach you in time. As it was, the birth was difficult, but you're both alive, and that's what matters." Bloodstone, the enemy. The pack that had been at war with Silvermoon for longer than Amara had been alive. She should be terrified. She should be grabbing her daughter and trying to flee. But exhaustion weighted her limbs, and something else kept her still. A strange sense that she was, impossibly, safe here. Why? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Why save me? The healer's expression shifted, becoming unreadable. "That's not my question to answer. The Alpha King wants to speak with you. Are you strong enough?" No, Amara wanted to say. She would never be strong enough to face Atlas, the ruthless king, the wolf whose name mothers in Silvermoon used to scare misbehaving children. Stories painted him as a monster, 7 feet of pure violence, a killer who'd earned his crown by defeating every challenger who'd ever dared question his authority. But she was in his fortress, in his debt, and refusing probably wasn't an option. "Yes," she said. The healer nodded and stepped to the door, murmuring something to a guard outside. Amara used the brief moment alone to look around the room properly. Calling it a guest chamber seemed insufficient. It was a suite, with the massive bed, a sitting area with plush chairs positioned before a fireplace where flames crackled warmly, a wall of windows overlooking forests that stretched to distant mountains. Luxury upon luxury, beautiful and confusing. This wasn't how you treated prisoners. The door opened again and Amara's breath caught. Atlas filled the doorway in a way that seemed physically impossible, his shoulders nearly spanning its width. He was tall, yes, but not monstrously so. Perhaps 6.5 feet, with the build of a warrior in his prime. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes were an unusual amber color that seemed to glow in the firelight. He wore simple clothes, black shirt and pants, but carried himself with an authority that needed no crown, no ceremony. Their eyes met, and the world tilted. It hit her like a physical blow. That same recognition she'd felt with Marcus, that sense of mine that defined the mate bond. But that was impossible. She'd already had her mate. The bond was severed. Wolves only got one. Everyone knew that, and she'd already lost hers. Atlas had gone completely still in the doorway, his hand gripping the frame so tightly she heard the wood creak. His amber eyes were wide, his expression stunned. He felt it too. Whatever this was, this impossible pull between them, it wasn't one-sided. "Leave us," he said, his voice rougher than she'd expected. The healer bowed and departed, closing the door with a soft click. Silence stretched between them. Amara became acutely aware that she was in a nightgown someone had dressed her in, that her hair was loose and tangled around her shoulders, that she'd never felt more vulnerable in her life. Atlas remained by the door, as if afraid to come closer. "You're from Silvermoon," he finally said. It wasn't a question. "I was." The correction came automatically. "My former alpha, rejected me. I have no pack." Something flickered in his expression. "Marcus." He said the name like a curse. "I heard rumors he was taking a new mate. I didn't realize." His gaze dropped to where her daughter slept. "The child is his." "Yes." Amara lifted her chin, defensive. "If that's a problem, it's not." Atlas moved into the room finally, though he kept his distance, circling to the fireplace rather than approaching the bed. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "Ancient law protects mothers and children, regardless of pack affiliation. You and your daughter are safe here." Why? It was the second time she'd asked that question, but she needed to understand. "We're enemies. Silvermoon and Bloodstone have been killing each other for decades. Why show me mercy?" Atlas turned to face her, and the firelight cast his features in sharp relief. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was beautiful in a dangerous way, like a blade. "Because," he said slowly, "I've spent 20 years fighting a war I inherited, killing wolves I have no personal hatred for, perpetuating a cycle that's done nothing but spill blood. And when my scouts brought you in, dying in the rain, pregnant and alone..." He paused, jaw tightening. "I thought, here's a chance to be something other than the ruthless king for once. To show mercy instead of violence." The words were pretty, but Amara heard what he wasn't saying, that he felt this pull between them just as she did, and it terrified him. "There's a prophecy," Atlas continued. "Our elders have been debating it since you arrived. A wolf without a pack will bridge two worlds and end the ancient war. They think it might refer to you." Amara laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "I'm nobody, a rejected mate with a baby and no home. I'm not going to end any wars." "Maybe." Atlas's amber eyes held hers with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Or maybe you're exactly what the prophecy describes. Either way, you're under my protection now. Both of you." A commotion outside the door interrupted them. Raised voices, one of them sharp with anger. Atlas's expression darkened, but before he could move, the door burst open. A man strode in, nearly as tall as Atlas, with close-cropped brown hair and cold blue eyes. He wore the insignia of a beta, second in command. Alpha, we need to talk. Now. His gaze swept over Amara with barely concealed hostility. The pack is in an uproar. You brought a silver moon wolf into our fortress, gave her the royal guest chambers, and now you're— He cut himself off, clearly thinking better of whatever he'd been about to say. Damien, Atlas's voice dropped into a dangerous register. Watch your tone. Watch my tone? Damien laughed, sharp and humorless. I'm your beta. It's my job to tell you when you're making a mistake that could fracture pack loyalty. And this? This is a mistake. Atlas moved then, crossing the distance between them with predatory grace. He didn't touch his beta, but he didn't need to. His presence alone was a threat. I am Alpha King. My word is law. Amara and her child are under my personal protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me for the position. The room crackled with tension. Amara held her breath, terrified this was about to come to violence. Damien stared at his alpha for a long moment, something working in his expression, frustration, concern, and beneath it all, genuine worry. I'm not questioning your authority, Damien said finally, more quietly. I'm questioning your judgment. This woman could be a spy. This could be a trap. At minimum, it's going to look like weakness to the other packs, and you know what happens to alphas who appear weak. Let them think what they want. Atlas's eyes never left his beta's face. This is not up for discussion. Damien's jaw clenched, but he bowed his head in reluctant submission. As you command, Alpha. He shot one more unreadable look at Amara, then left, the door closing more forcefully than necessary behind him. Atlas stood very still for a moment, tension radiating from his shoulders. When he finally turned back to Amara, some of that dangerous intensity had faded from his expression, replaced by something that might have been regret. I apologize for that. Damien is protective of the pack, of me. He means well. He's not wrong, though. Amara found her voice again, though it shook slightly. I'm a liability to you, to everyone here. Maybe I should leave, find somewhere neutral. No. The word came out harder than Atlas seemed to intend. He took a breath, moderating his tone. You just gave birth. You're recovering. Your daughter is barely a day old. You're not going anywhere until you're both strong enough to travel safely. And then? Then we'll figure it out. Atlas moved toward the door, putting distance between them again, as if proximity made it harder to think. For now, rest, heal. Everything else can wait. He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Amara feel suddenly, overwhelmingly alone. She turned to look at her sleeping daughter, this tiny life that depended entirely on her, and wondered what she'd brought them both into. Outside the windows, dawn was breaking over Bloodstone territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the bassinet, her daughter stirred and made a small sound. Not crying, just acknowledging the world she'd been born into. Amara reached out with trembling fingers to touch her baby's soft cheek. Luna, she whispered, the name coming to her like a gift. Your name is Luna. And despite everything, the rejection, the danger, the impossible situation, Amara felt the first stirring of something that wasn't quite hope, but wasn't quite despair either. Atlas had called her nobody, but as she sat in a bed fit for royalty, in the heart of enemy territory, protected by an alpha king who felt the pull of a bond that shouldn't exist, Amara wondered if maybe, just maybe, nobody was exactly what the world needed her to be. The first time Atlas held Luna, Amara thought her heart might stop. It was 3 days after she'd woken in the fortress, and she'd been standing by the window watching dawn paint the mountains gold when he'd entered without knocking. She'd turned, a protest forming on her lips, But the words died when she saw what he carried. A carved wooden rattle, small enough to fit in his massive palm, with tiny wolves etched into the surface. "I made this," he'd said, and the uncertainty in his voice was so at odds with his reputation that Amara could only stare. "My father taught me woodwork when I was young. I thought she should have something." Luna had been fussing in her bassinet, making those small, querulous sounds that meant she was working up to a proper cry. Without thinking, Atlas had set the rattle aside and lifted her, tucking her against his chest with a practiced ease that shocked Amara. The baby had settled immediately, her tiny fist catching in his shirt, and something in Atlas's expression had cracked open. That was when Amara understood she was in real danger. Not the kind that came from being surrounded by enemies, but the kind that came from watching the ruthless king cradle her newborn daughter like she was made of spun glass, from the way his voice went soft when he murmured to Luna in a language Amara didn't recognize, from how her traitorous heart seized every time he walked into a room. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that felt both natural and terrifying. Atlas came, every morning, ostensibly to check on their welfare, but he always stayed longer than necessary. He'd hold Luna while Amara ate breakfast, pointing out birds through the window, telling the baby about the fortress's history as if she could understand. Sometimes Amara caught him just watching the baby sleep, his expression unguarded in a way it never was around his pack. "You're good with her," Amara observed one morning, 2 weeks into her recovery. They were in the fortress gardens where Atlas had insisted she needed fresh air and sunlight. Luna dozed in his arms while Amara walked slowly along paths lined with late-blooming roses. Her body was healing, the pain from childbirth fading to a dull ache, but her emotions remained raw and confusing. Atlas glanced down at the sleeping infant, and something softened in his face. "I like children. I always thought—" He trailed off, jaw tightening, and Amara realized he'd been about to reveal something personal before catching himself. "Thought what?" He was quiet for so long she didn't think he'd answer. They passed beneath an arbor heavy with wisteria, purple blossoms casting dappled shadows across his features. "I thought I'd have my own by now," he finally said. "A mate, children, something beyond war and duty. But there was never time, never the right person. And then after a while, I stopped looking." The admission hung between them, weighted with implications neither dared examine too closely. Amara focused on the roses, on their deep crimson petals, on anything except the way her pulse jumped at his words. "The pack is talking," she said instead, changing the subject to safer ground. "I hear them when the healers visit. They don't understand why you're protecting me." "I don't need them to understand. I need them to obey." "That's not how it works, though, is it?" Amara stopped walking and turned to face him. "You're their alpha, but you also need their loyalty, their trust. And every day I stay here, both of those things erode a little more." Atlas's amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Are you asking to leave?" "I'm saying you might not have a choice. Neither of us might." Luna stirred in his arms, making a small sound. Atlas adjusted his hold automatically, rocking slightly, and the baby settled again. The gentleness of the gesture contrasted so sharply with everything Amara had heard about him. The ruthless warrior, the merciless alpha king who'd killed dozens in combat, the leader who'd spent 2 decades perpetuating a brutal war. "I was 7 when my parents died," Atlas said abruptly. "Old enough to remember them, young enough that the memories feel more like dreams now. My father was alpha before me, strong, fair, loved by the pack. My mother was his perfect match, fierce and kind in equal measure." His voice went flat, emotionless, in the way of someone recounting a trauma they'd spent years learning to bury. "Silvermoon wolves ambushed them during a peace negotiation, killed them both and left their bodies at our border as a message." Amara's hand flew to her mouth. "Atlas, I was crowned Alpha King at 12. Too young, too angry, too consumed by hatred for the pack that had destroyed my family. Damien's father was my regent until I came of age, and he taught me that mercy was weakness, that trust got you killed, that the only way to honor my parents was to make Silvermoon bleed for what they'd done. He looked down at Luna, his expression unreadable. I've spent 20 years being exactly what he taught me to be, and I was good at it. So good that eventually, I forgot there was any other way to be. The raw honesty in his voice made Amara's chest ache. She took a step closer, close enough that she could see the small scars that marked his hands, evidence of countless battles. You don't seem like that person with her. No, he agreed quietly. I don't. His gaze lifted from Luna to meet Amara's eyes. I don't seem like that person with you either. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something neither could name. Amara was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the way the morning sun caught in his dark hair, of how her body leaned toward his as if pulled by invisible strings. Alpha? Damien's voice shattered the moment. He stood at the garden entrance, his expression carefully neutral in a way that meant he'd seen too much. The council is requesting your presence. Atlas's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He passed Luna carefully to Amara, his fingers brushing hers in the transfer, and the brief contact sent electricity racing up her arm. His eyes darkened as if he felt it too, but he stepped back, putting distance between them with visible effort. Stay in the gardens, he said. The guards will be nearby if you need anything. He left with Damien, their voices fading as they walked back toward the fortress. Amara stood alone among the roses, Luna warm and solid in her arms, and tried to calm her racing heart. This was madness. She was in enemy territory. Her former mate had rejected her barely a month ago, and she was developing feelings for an alpha king whose pack had been killing her people for generations. She should want to leave. She should be planning her escape, finding neutral territory, building a life far from both Silvermoon and Bloodstone. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Atlas's face when he held her daughter, the unexpected gentleness in his hands, the vulnerability in his voice when he spoke of his parents. Your mother is in trouble, she whispered to Luna, who yawned and made a small, contented sound that suggested she didn't care about any trouble as long as she was fed and warm. The trouble intensified over the following days. Atlas continued his daily visits, but they grew longer, more intimate in ways that had nothing to do with physical touch. He brought her to his private library, a vast room filled with books that spanned floor to ceiling, and they spent hours there while Luna slept. He'd read passages aloud in that deep voice of his, or they'd discuss pack politics, or sometimes they'd simply sit in comfortable silence, the kind that only happened between people who'd moved beyond needing to fill every moment with words. It was in the library, a week after their conversation in the gardens, that things shifted irrevocably. Amara had been examining the shelves, running her fingers over leather spines, when she'd found a section dedicated to werewolf history. She'd pulled down a volume on mate bonds, curiosity overcoming caution, and had been skimming through descriptions of true mates when Atlas spoke from behind her. Looking for answers? She nearly dropped the book. He stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, his chest almost touching her back. She should step away. She should make an excuse and leave. Instead, she turned to face him, which put them even closer together, her back against the bookshelf and his body bracketing hers. I don't understand what's happening, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I already had a mate bond with Marcus. It shouldn't be possible to feel... This? Atlas braced one hand on the shelf above her head, leaning in. This thing that makes every instinct scream, mine. Even though I have no claim to you, that makes me want to destroy anyone who even thinks about hurting you. That turns me into someone I don't recognize. Her breath came faster. His amber eyes had gone molten, and this close, she could see flecks of gold in them, could count the individual lashes that framed them. Yes, she managed. That. I don't understand it either. His free hand came up, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. Wolves get one mate bond. Everyone knows that. But what I feel when I'm near you is stronger than anything I've ever experienced, and I've never even had a mate bond before. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, the barest whisper of contact, and she shivered. What did the bond feel like with him? With Marcus? The question should have felt invasive, but coming from Atlas, it seemed necessary, vital even. Like recognition, Amara said slowly, trying to find words for something that defied description. Like finding something I'd been missing without knowing I was looking for it. It was warm and safe and right. She paused, then forced herself to honesty. But it never burned. It never made me feel like I might catch fire from a single touch. And this? His voice had gone rough. What does this feel like? Like burning, she whispered. Like falling. Like every moment I'm near you, I'm on the edge of something that will either save me or destroy me. And I don't know which. Atlas made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan. We can't do this. You know that. I know. You just gave birth. You're vulnerable. And I'm the alpha king of the pack that's been your enemy your entire life. I know that too. Then tell me to leave. His hand cupped her face fully now, thumb tracing her lower lip. Tell me to stay away from you. Because Amara, if you don't, I'm going to... The door to the library slammed open, and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Damien stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous, and behind him were two wolves Amara didn't recognize, pack members, she assumed, based on the way they averted their eyes from their alpha. We need you at the gates, Damien said, his voice tight. Now. Atlas's demeanor shifted instantly, the vulnerable man vanishing beneath the Alpha King's authority. What's happened? Silver Moon wolves at our border. Damien's cold blue eyes flicked to Amara, with a demand for her return. The walk from the library to the fortress gates felt like a descent into nightmare. Atlas had ordered Amara to stay behind, but she'd refused, some stubborn instinct telling her that hiding would only make things worse. They'd compromised by having her remain behind the wall with heavy guard while Atlas went out to meet the Silvermoon delegation. She stood on the parapet now, Luna strapped securely to her chest in a sling one of the healers had provided, and watched the drama unfold below. Her hands gripped the stone wall hard enough to hurt, but she couldn't make herself relax. Marcus stood at the head of a group of 20 warriors, his golden hair bright in the afternoon sun. Even at a distance, she could see the rigid line of his shoulders, the aggressive set of his stance. Atlas faced him with a handful of his own wolves, Damien at his right hand, and the tension between the two groups was thick enough to choke on. I don't think this is how diplomatic visits usually begin, Atlas's voice carried clearly, laced with mockery. Armed warriors at my border without announcement or invitation. This isn't a diplomatic visit. Marcus's voice held none of its usual smooth charm. You're harboring my mate and my child. I want them returned, now. Your mate? Atlas's tone went dangerous. I was under the impression you rejected her, publicly, while she was pregnant. A moment of poor judgment that I've reconsidered. Marcus took a step forward, and Atlas's wolves immediately bristled. She belongs to Silvermoon. The child is my heir. You have no right to keep them. I have every right under the ancient laws of Sanctuary. Amara came to my border dying, rejected and packless. I offered her protection. That makes her mine to protect, until she chooses otherwise. The casual possessiveness in Atlas's voice sent a complicated shiver through Amara. She saw Marcus's hands clench into fists, saw the way his jaw tightened. This was going to get violent. She could feel it building like a storm. Let me speak with her, Marcus demanded. If she wants to stay with our enemies, fine, but I have a right to hear it from her own lips. Atlas turned to look up at the parapet, his amber eyes finding her unerringly. Even across the distance, she felt the question in his gaze, the decision he was placing in her hands. She could refuse, she could stay hidden, but that would only prolong this confrontation, and with Luna strapped to her chest, she couldn't afford for it to become a battle. Amara descended the stairs with her guards flanking her protectively. The moment she appeared in the gateway, Marcus's entire demeanor changed. His expression softened into something that might have been genuine concern, and he started forward only to be blocked by Atlas's wolves. Amara. Marcus's voice held a note she'd never heard before, something that might have been regret. I need to talk to you. So talk, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Luna stirred against her chest, a small warm presence that gave her courage. Not here. Not with him listening. Please, just give me 5 minutes in private. For what we had, if nothing else. She felt Atlas's tension from across the courtyard, felt the way every wolf present held their breath. I don't think, she began. The attack came without warning. They didn't come from Marcus's group. They came from the forest, from the shadows, at least a dozen wolves moving with coordinated precision. Amara caught a flash of movement, heard someone shout a warning, and then chaos erupted. Atlas moved faster than she'd thought possible, covering the distance between them in seconds. His body slammed into hers, driving her to the ground, his bulk protecting both her and Luna as steel whistled through the air where she'd been standing. Arrows. Someone was shooting arrows. Inside! Atlas roared, and she felt him shift above her, bones cracking and reforming. His wolf form erupted from his human skin, massive and midnight black, all teeth and fury. He stood over her, snarling defiance at the attackers, while bloodstone wolves poured from the fortress to meet the threat. The battle was brutal and swift. The attackers wore no colors, no pack insignia, but they fought with the desperate ferocity of wolves with nothing to lose. Amara curled around Luna, making herself as small as possible, while violence raged around her. She heard screams, the wet sound of flesh tearing, the crack of bones breaking. Blood spattered the courtyard stones, and she couldn't tell whose it was. Through the chaos, she saw Marcus fighting alongside Atlas's wolves, his Silver Moon warriors joining the defense. Whatever else he was, he clearly hadn't arranged this attack. The assassins targeted both groups indiscriminately, but whenever one got close to where Amara huddled, they made her their primary focus. They were here for her specifically. Atlas fought like the monster from the stories, all savage grace and lethal precision. His massive jaws closed around an attacker's throat, shaking once before dropping the body and moving to the next threat. Blood matted his dark fur, but he didn't slow, didn't retreat, putting himself between Amara and danger again and again. When the last assassin fell, the courtyard fell into ringing silence. Atlas shifted back to human form, his chest heaving, blood streaking his skin. His eyes immediately found Amara, scanning her frantically. Are you hurt? He crossed to her, helping her stand with hands that shook slightly. Luna? We're fine. We're both fine. She was trembling, adrenaline making her voice unsteady. What was that? Who were they? Shadowfang. Damien stalked over, his expression grim. He had blood on his face, but it didn't appear to be his own. I recognize the fighting style. They're supposed to be exiled, scattered. This was organized. We took one alive, another wolf called from across the courtyard. They had a figure pinned, a lean male with wild eyes and scars covering his visible skin. Atlas approached the captive with predatory focus, and even from several feet away, Amara could feel the alpha command radiating from him. Talk, he said simply. Why attack here? Why now? The Shadowfang wolf laughed, the sound unhinged. The prophecy. Everyone knows about the prophecy now. A wolf without a pack will bridge 2 worlds and end the ancient war. His manic gaze fixed on Amara. She's the key. The one who can unite the packs or destroy them all. Whoever controls her controls the future. A chill raced down Amara's spine. She looked at Atlas and saw her own shock reflected in his face. Behind them, Marcus had gone very still, his expression calculating. "That's why you're really keeping her," Marcus said slowly, addressing Atlas. "Not sanctuary, not honor. You want to use her to end the war on your terms." "That's not," Atlas started. "Isn't it?" Marcus's lip curled. "You've always been brilliant at strategy, Atlas. Protect the prophesied wolf, earn her loyalty, use her power to force Silvermoon into submission. It's actually quite clever." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Then let her go. If you're truly protecting her out of the goodness of your heart, release her to neutral territory. Let the High Council guard her. So you can manipulate them into giving her to you instead?" Atlas moved to stand beside Amara, his presence a solid wall at her back. "I'm not a fool." "Neither am I. I see the way you look at her, the way you touch her." Marcus's voice went cold. "You want her for yourself. You always did enjoy taking what wasn't yours." Atlas's growl was pure alpha dominance, and several wolves dropped to their knees involuntarily. "She was never yours. You rejected her. A mistake I'm willing to rectify." Too late. They faced each other across the blood-stained courtyard. Two alpha kings separated by decades of hatred, and now by something infinitely more complicated. Amara stood frozen between them, Luna's small body warm against her chest, and realized with crystalline clarity that this was only the beginning. The prophecy had elevated her, from a rejected mate to a chess piece in a game being played by forces she barely understood. "Take your wolves and leave my territory," Atlas said, his voice deadly quiet. "Before I decide we're still at war." Marcus held his ground for another moment, then jerked his head in a sharp nod. "This isn't over. The child is still mine by blood. I have rights." "You have nothing." Atlas didn't move as Marcus and his warriors retreated toward the border. "And if you come back without invitation, I'll consider it an act of war." When the Silvermoon wolves had disappeared into the forest, Atlas finally turned to Amara. His amber eyes were wild, still touched by his wolf's fury, but when he reached out to touch her shoulder, his hand was gentle. "Inside," he said. "We need to talk." Atlas's private chambers were nothing like Amara had imagined. She'd expected opulence, displays of power, the trappings of an alpha king. Instead, the rooms were almost spare. A large bed with simple dark linens, a sitting area with worn leather furniture, walls lined with weapons and books in equal measure. Personal, real. He'd dismissed the guards outside his door, leaving them completely alone. Now he paced before the fireplace, tension radiating from every line of his body. He'd cleaned the blood off, but hadn't bothered changing clothes, and his shirt was torn across one shoulder, revealing smooth skin marked with old scars. Luna slept in a nest of blankets on his bed, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Amara sat in one of the leather chairs, her body aching now that the adrenaline had faded, and watched Atlas struggle with whatever he was trying to say. "I didn't know about the prophecy," she said finally, when the silence had stretched too long. "Before today, I mean. I thought it was just vague, metaphorical. Most prophecies are." Atlas stopped pacing and turned to face her. "But this one is specific enough to make you a target for every faction that wants to control the future. Shadowfang wants to use you to destroy the pack system entirely. Marcus wants you to legitimize his claim and strengthen Silvermoon's position. Other packs will have other plans." He paused. "You understand what this means?" "That I'm trapped." The words tasted bitter. "Here, specifically, because anywhere else, I'm too vulnerable. I'll keep you safe." He said it like a vow. "Whatever it takes." Amara looked at him. This powerful alpha who'd sacrificed his reputation to protect her, who'd fought like a demon to keep her alive, who made her feel things that terrified her in their intensity. Why? She asked. And don't tell me it's just about sanctuary or ancient laws. Why does it matter so much to you? Atlas crossed the room and knelt before her chair, bringing their faces level. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be before the war consumed everything. Because your daughter looks at me like I'm not a monster. Because when I hold her, I can imagine a future that isn't just blood and duty. He paused, jaw working. And because every instinct I have screams that you're mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to... He cut himself off, but the unfinished thought hung between them, electric and dangerous. Yours to what? Amara heard herself whisper. Love. The word came out rough, almost angry. Which is insane because we barely know each other, because you were just rejected by another alpha, because my pack is already questioning my judgment, and this would shatter what little faith they have left, because I spent 20 years hating everything Silvermoon represented, and you were one of them. He rose abruptly, turning away. I shouldn't be saying any of this. Amara stood on shaky legs, her heart hammering. She crossed to him, placed her hand on his back, felt him go still. My bond with Marcus, she said quietly. It was real. I felt it. But it was comfortable, like putting on clothes that fit well. This, what I feel when I'm near you, it's nothing like that. It's overwhelming and terrifying, and I don't understand it, but I can't pretend it doesn't exist. Atlas turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. I haven't felt alive in years, he admitted. I've been going through the motions, being the alpha king everyone needs me to be, fighting the war I inherited. And then you stumbled into my territory, bleeding and pregnant and dying, and something in me just... He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Woke up. This time when he cupped her cheek, she leaned into the touch, letting her eyes fall closed for a moment. When she opened them again, she found him watching her with an expression that made her feel simultaneously precious and desperately desired. The bond with Marcus never burned, she said, repeating her earlier words. But this? This feels like I'm burning alive, and I don't want it to stop. Atlas made that sound again, the one that was half growl, half groan. If we do this, if we acknowledge what's between us, there's no going back. Every enemy I have becomes yours. Every battle I fight becomes yours. And the pack? He trailed off, pain flickering across his features. The pack won't accept it, Amara finished for him. I know. I've seen how they look at me. I don't care. The words came out fierce. Let them challenge me if they dare. Let the entire world come at us. I've spent 20 years being what everyone else needed. For once, I want to be selfish. I want to choose what I want instead of what I should want. And you want me? Even now, part of her couldn't quite believe it. I want you so much it's driving me insane. Atlas pulled her closer, his hands framing her face. I want to keep you safe and make you smile and watch you be a mother to Luna. I want to learn every expression you make and hear every thought in that brilliant mind. I want to build something with you that isn't about war or duty or prophecies. I want you, Amara. Just you. Tears pricked her eyes. I want that too, she whispered. Even though I shouldn't, even though it's too soon and too complicated and probably doomed. I want it anyway. Then take it. His thumb traced her lower lip. Take this. Take me. Whatever happens after, at least we'll have chosen it. She rose on her toes, closing the small distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle for exactly 3 seconds before it became something else entirely. Atlas made a desperate sound and hauled her closer, his arms banding around her as if he could pull her inside his skin. Amara gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss into something that felt less like affection and more like claiming. This was nothing like kissing Marcus. That had been pleasant, warm, safe. This was fire and desperation and need that made her knees weak. Her hands fisted in his torn shirt, and she felt his heart hammering against her palm, as out of control as her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Atlas rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever this is between us," he said roughly, "it's stronger than any bond I've ever heard of, stronger than logic or sense. And I'm terrified of it, Amara, but I'm more terrified of losing it before I even know what it could be." She nodded, not trusting her voice. On the bed, Luna made a small sound in her sleep, and they both turned to look at her. The baby had one tiny fist pressed against her mouth, her face peaceful and perfect in the firelight. "She deserves better than this," Amara said softly. "Better than being caught between warring packs and prophecies and political games." "Then we give her better." Atlas's arm came around Amara's waist, solid and sure. "We end the war. We fulfill the prophecy, whatever it means. We build a world where she doesn't have to be afraid." Just like that? Despite everything, Amara found herself smiling slightly. "You make it sound simple." "Nothing about this is simple, but I've spent 20 years making everything complicated, and I'm tired of it." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "I mean it, Amara. Whatever comes, we face it together. No more hiding what we feel, no more pretending this doesn't exist. If the pack challenges me, I'll meet the challenge. If Marcus wants war, he'll get it. But I'm done choosing duty over what I actually want." The words should have terrified her. They were promising a future of conflict, of impossible odds, of standing against forces that had been entrenched for generations. But looking into Atlas's amber eyes, seeing the fierce determination there, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced since before Marcus's rejection: hope. "Together," she agreed. "Whatever comes." He kissed her again, softer this time, a seal on the promise they were making. Outside the windows, night had fallen, completely, and in the courtyard below, she could hear the sounds of the pack moving around, cleaning up from the battle, whispering about their alpha's strange new obsession. They had no idea what was coming. Neither did Amara, really. But wrapped in Atlas's arms, her daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, she thought maybe, just maybe, they could survive it. As long as they didn't have to choose between love and duty, as long as they could have both. The council's summons came at dawn, shattering that fragile hope into pieces. Amara woke to urgent knocking, to voices raised in anger outside Atlas's chambers. She was still dressed, having fallen asleep in the chair while he took the bed so he could guard Luna. Now he was at the door, his jaw tight as Damien spoke in urgent, furious tones. "Can't ignore them. The entire council is assembled, and they're invoking ancient rites. Atlas, if you don't come now, they'll consider it an abandonment of your duties." Atlas's hands clenched into fists. "Give me 5 minutes." "You don't have 5 minutes. You have—" Damien caught sight of Amara, and his expression went cold. "This is her fault. Everything that's happened, it's because you can't see past—" "Damien." Atlas's voice dropped into that dangerous register. "Don't finish that sentence." His beta stared at him for a long moment, something working in his expression: frustration, concern, and underneath it all, genuine fear. "They're going to make you choose," he said quietly. "Her or the pack. And if you choose wrong, we lose you either way." He left, and Atlas stood frozen in the doorway. Slowly, he turned to look at Amara, and the anguish in his face made her heart crack. "Go," she said, even though the word hurt. "Your pack needs you." "Amara? It's all right." She managed a smile that felt like breaking. "I understand. I always understood." She knew that was a lie. She knew he would choose his pack. He had to, because that's what alphas did. They put their people first, always. Marcus had chosen duty over her. Now Atlas would do the same, and Amara would be alone again, rejected again, lost again. Atlas left for the council chambers looking like he was walking to his execution. The trial, because that's what it was, despite their careful language, lasted hours. Amara waited in Atlas's chambers, Luna fussing in her arms, and tried not to let her imagination run wild. She failed spectacularly. They would demand she be banished. Atlas would be forced to agree. She'd be sent to neutral territory where Marcus's corrupted allies on the High Council would seize her, and Luna would grow up belonging to a father who'd never wanted her mother. She was pacing the room, on the verge of genuine panic when the door opened. Atlas stood there, and his expression told her everything before he spoke. "The council has given me an ultimatum," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "You leave by dawn, or they invoke the right of leadership challenge. If I refuse to fight or if I lose, the pack falls to whoever defeats me." There it was, the choice. Amara held Luna tighter, as if the baby's warmth could protect her from what was coming. "So I go," she said. "It's the only solution." "There's another option." Atlas stepped into the room, but he didn't come close. "I could claim you as my true mate, formally, before the pack. It would make you untouchable by pack law." Hope leapt in her chest before reality crushed it. "But I've already been rejected," she said. "I already had a mate bond with Marcus. If you claim me now, you'd be—" "Forfeit my position as Alpha King," he said it flatly. "Ancient law. A rejected mate carries a taint, and an alpha who chooses one over his pack's well-being isn't fit to lead. It's outdated and unfair, but it's still law." "Then you can't. You can't give up everything you are for you?" He moved closer now, his amber eyes burning. "Watch me." "Atlas, no." Amara's voice broke. "You can't choose me over 1,000 wolves who depend on you. That's not noble, it's selfish. We've known each other for weeks. What you feel, what we both feel, it might not even be real. It could just be proximity and stress and— Don't." The word came out harsh. "Don't minimize this. What I feel for you is the most real thing in my life. Even if that's true, you can't abandon your pack." She blinked back tears, trying to stay strong. "And I can't let you. If you did that for me, you'd eventually resent me. You'd hate me for making you choose, and I can't live with that." Atlas's expression crumbled. "So what? I just let you go? Send you away knowing there are assassins and enemy alphas and corrupt council members who all want to use you? The High Council is compromised. Marcus has allies there, and after that attack, you can bet Shadowfang does too." He raked a hand through his hair in frustration. "Amara, if I send you to neutral territory, it's not protection. It's just handing you to whoever gets there first." "Then what do we do?" She was crying now, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. "Because I don't see a way out where we both get what we want." Atlas crossed to her, gathering her and Luna into his arms. She felt him trembling, felt the ragged edge to his breathing. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I know it's too soon and too complicated, but I love you. And Luna, I love the life I can see with both of you. But there are 1,000 wolves counting on me to be their Alpha King, and if I fail them, they'll suffer." Amara pulled back enough to look at his face. "I know, and I can't be the reason for that. I won't be." They stood wrapped around each other as dawn light filtered through the windows, and Amara understood this was goodbye. Real goodbye, not the hopeful kind where they promised to find each other again. Atlas would send her to neutral territory because it was the only option that gave her any chance of survival, and she would go because staying would destroy him. Love wasn't enough. It was never enough. "I'll assign my best wolves to guard you," Atlas said, his voice rough. "And I'll send messages ahead to allies in the High Council, the ones I know aren't compromised. You'll be as safe as I can make you. Will I see you again? The pause before he answered told her everything. I don't know. Luna chose that moment to wake, her small face scrunching up in preparation for a cry. Atlas took her gently, cradling her close, and Amara watched him memorize her daughter's face like he was trying to burn the image into his mind. You would have been a good father to her, she whispered. I wanted to be. He passed Luna back, his hands lingering on Amara's. In another life, in another world. We could have been happy, she finished. We would have been extraordinary. The preparation for her departure took 3 more hours. Amara was given supplies, warm clothes, a horse with saddlebags packed with everything a traveling mother with an infant might need. 5 wolves would accompany her, Atlas's most trusted fighters who'd sworn blood oaths to protect her with their lives. The fortress courtyard filled with Bloodstone Pack members, watching in silence as their alpha king stood beside the Silver Moon wolf he'd protected, the enemy he'd defended against his own people. Amara could feel their resentment, their relief that she was leaving, their confusion at their alpha's obvious pain. Atlas held Luna one last time, whispering something to the baby in that language Amara didn't understand. Then he passed her to Amara and helped her settle in the saddle, his hands careful and sure. If anything happens, he said quietly, if you're in danger, send word. I'll come. Don't, Amara said, forcing strength into her voice. Don't risk everything again. Promise me. He didn't promise. They both knew he wouldn't. Instead, he stepped back, and the distance between them felt like miles rather than feet. Thank you, Amara said, the words hopelessly inadequate. For everything. For saving us, for... Don't thank me. Atlas's amber eyes shone with unshed tears. Don't thank me for falling in love with you, and then being too weak to choose you. You're not weak. You're exactly what your pack needs you to be. Then why does it feel like I'm dying? She had no answer for that. With Luna secure against her chest, Amara turned her horse toward the gates. The 5 guards fell in around her, a protective formation that would have made her feel safe if she could feel anything at all. As they passed through the gates, she looked back once. Atlas stood alone in the courtyard, his massive frame somehow diminished, and she knew she was taking his heart with her just as surely as he was keeping hers behind. The gates closed, and Amara rode toward neutral territory, toward an uncertain future, toward safety that felt more like a trap. Behind her, she left the only place that had felt like home since Marcus's rejection, the only man who'd made her feel treasured instead of tolerated. Luna made a small sound, and Amara looked down at her daughter's perfect face. It's just us now, she whispered. We'll be all right. We have to be. She didn't believe it, but she rode on anyway because that's what mothers did. They survived, they endured, they protected their children even when their own hearts were shattering. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the world in shades of gold that felt like mockery. Behind her, Bloodstone Fortress disappeared into the distance. Ahead lay mountains and uncertainty and dangers she couldn't even imagine. Amara had been rejected twice now, by different men for different reasons, but the pain felt remarkably similar. She'd thought she understood heartbreak after Marcus. Now she knew better. This was what heartbreak felt like, watching something precious disappear behind you while riding towards something that terrified you, knowing you'd made the right choice even though it felt like dying. Atlas had chosen duty, just like Marcus before him. And Amara was alone again, trapped in a story where love was never quite enough to overcome the weight of responsibility and fear. She should have known better than to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. Amara held her daughter close and rode on into the unknown, her heart left behind in a fortress with an alpha king who loved her but couldn't choose her. Some fairy tales didn't have happy endings. She was learning that the hard way. The neutral territory compound sat nestled in the mountain highlands like a stone crown, ancient and supposedly sacred. Amara had arrived 3 days ago with her 5 guards, had been welcomed by council representatives with warm smiles and careful words, had been given comfortable rooms overlooking the valley below. She should have known immediately that something was wrong. The first sign came when her guards were separated from her for their own accommodations. The second came when the council members who'd greeted her so warmly failed to appear again. The third came when she tried to leave her rooms and found the doors barred from outside. Now, standing at her window, with Luna crying softly in her arms, Amara watched Marcus's warriors surround the compound and understood she'd been delivered into a trap as neat as any snare. "Hush, little one," she whispered, rocking her daughter with hands that wanted to shake. "It'll be all right. Somehow, it'll be—" The door burst open. Amara spun, instinctively clutching Luna closer, and found herself facing Marcus for the first time since he'd rejected her before his entire pack. He looked different, harder somehow, with new lines carved around his mouth and eyes that held something feverish and desperate. "Amara." He said her name like he had the right to it. "You're coming home." "I don't have a home." She backed toward the window, even though there was nowhere to go. "You made sure of that." "I made a mistake." Marcus moved into the room, and 2 of his warriors flanked him. "I see that now. The political marriage, the rejection, it was all wrong. You belong with Silvermoon. Our daughter belongs with Silvermoon. She's not yours." The words came out fierce. "You rejected us both, remember? In front of everyone. You chose your precious alliance over your own child." Something dark flickered across Marcus's face. "I chose the pack's survival, and now I'm choosing to correct my error. The council has agreed our bond was never properly severed. You're still legally mine, Amara. You and the child." Horror crawled up her spine. "That's not true. You rejected me. I felt the bond break." "Did you?" Marcus smiled, and it was a terrible expression. "Or did you just feel pain and assume? The ritual wasn't completed properly, which means you're still bound to Silvermoon, still bound to me, and that bastard Atlas had no right to keep you." Amara's mind raced. Was he lying? He had to be lying. But the council representatives who'd brought her here, they'd been so kind, so reassuring. If they were in Marcus's pocket, if they'd falsified documents or twisted laws— "Even if that were true," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "I don't want you. I'll never want you again." "What you want doesn't matter." Marcus gestured to his warriors. "Take her. Carefully. Don't harm the child." They moved forward, and Amara opened her mouth to scream, to fight, to do anything. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass and fur and raw fury. Atlas landed in the center of the room in his massive wolf form, larger than any wolf had a right to be, his dark coat rippling with muscle and his amber eyes blazing with lethal intent. He shifted mid-lunge, becoming human again just long enough to roar, "Get away from her!" Then he was on Marcus's warriors like vengeance incarnate. Amara had seen Atlas fight before, but this was different. This wasn't strategic or controlled. This was savage, desperate, the fighting of a man who'd already lost everything and had nothing left to lose. He moved through Marcus's wolves like a force of nature, all claws and teeth and terrible purpose. "Atlas!" She didn't mean to scream his name, but it tore out of her anyway. "You shouldn't be here. Your pack isn't mine anymore." He ducked under a warrior's strike and sent the wolf flying with a brutal kick. "Damien is Alpha King now. I'm just a wolf who chose love over duty, and I'd make that choice again every fucking time." Marcus snarled and shifted, lunging for Atlas's throat. They collided in a tangle of fur and fury, rolling across the floor, and Amara backed against the wall with Luna wailing in her arms. Through the broken window, she could see more wolves pouring into the compound. Atlas's loyal followers, the ones who'd chosen to abandon their pack and follow him into exile. They were outnumbered 3-1. "You're insane!" Marcus's voice came out distorted by his wolf form. You gave up everything for a rejected mate and a child that isn't even yours. She's mine! Atlas's claws raked across Marcus's shoulder, drawing blood. Amara is mine. Luna is mine. And I will burn down this entire mountain before I let you take them. He meant it. Amara could see it in every line of his body, hear it in every word. He'd really done it, challenged his beta, passed on his crown, walked away from everything he was to choose her. The realization was terrifying and overwhelming, and filled her with such fierce love she could barely breathe. But love wouldn't be enough if they were all slaughtered here. More of Marcus's warriors poured through the door. The corrupt council members appeared behind them, their false kindness stripped away to reveal cold calculation. One of them, an ancient wolf with silver-shot hair, raised his hand. Enough! Alpha Marcus, you promised us this would be quick. Kill Atlas and take your mate. We don't have time for… Marcus and Atlas ignored him entirely, locked in their brutal dance. Blood spattered the floor. Someone howled. Luna's cries reached a fever pitch, and Amara pressed her back against the wall, holding her daughter close, watching the man she loved fight impossible odds because he'd chosen her over everything. Not like this, she thought desperately. He can't die because of me. Not after sacrificing everything. Not after choosing love when the whole world told him to choose duty. Marcus got the upper hand, slamming Atlas against the floor with enough force to crack stone. His jaws went for Atlas's throat, and Amara saw the killing blow coming as clearly as if time had slowed. No! The word exploded out of her with a force that wasn't entirely her own. Light erupted from Amara's body, ancient, powerful, undeniable. It flooded the room like dawn breaking, like the first sunrise, like something primal and sacred that had been sleeping in her blood for generations. Every wolf in the room froze mid-motion, held in place by an authority that transcended pack bonds and alpha commands. Amara's eyes glowed with that same ancient light. She could feel power thrumming through her veins, could sense the threads connecting her to every wolf present, could feel something vast and old awakening in her consciousness. Luna had gone silent, staring up at her mother with wide eyes. Stop! Amara's voice resonated with layers, her own voice, yes, but underneath it something deeper, older, that spoke directly to the wolf in every creature present. All of you, stop this now! Marcus's jaws were still locked open an inch from Atlas's throat, but he couldn't complete the bite, couldn't move. His eyes rolled wildly, filled with confusion and primal fear. Around the room, warriors stood frozen, some mid-strike, others mid-shift, all of them trapped by the power radiating from a wolf they'd dismissed as weak. Atlas managed to speak, barely. Amara, what? The prophecy. The ancient council member's voice came out strangled, his face pale with awe. The Luna. She's the Luna. The power sang through Amara, showing her things she'd never known she knew. The original Luna, the first werewolf mother, had possessed the ability to command peace, to override even an alpha's authority when violence threatened the pack's survival. That power had been diluted over generations, scattered through bloodlines, assumed lost forever. But it wasn't lost. It had been waiting for a crisis great enough to awaken it, waiting for a moment when the choice was peace or annihilation, waiting for her. I am descended from the first Luna. Amara's voice still carried that strange resonance. I carry her power, her authority, her purpose. And I say this ends. Now. She released her hold slightly, allowing movement but not violence. Marcus stumbled back from Atlas, his wolf form shimmering as he struggled between shifting and staying. Atlas rose slowly, his eyes never leaving Amara's face, and the expression there was pure wonder. You're not a rejected mate, he whispered. You're not powerless. You're More than we knew. Amara looked at her daughter, at Luna's small face, and understood suddenly why Marcus had wanted her back, not for love. You knew. She turned her glowing eyes on Marcus. Or suspected. The prophecy named me specifically. A wolf without a pack will bridge two worlds. You weren't trying to reclaim your mate. You were trying to control the Luna. Marcus shifted back to human form, and his expression confirmed everything. You belong to Silvermoon. That power belongs to Silvermoon. With you at my side, I belong to no one. The light flared brighter. That's the point. I'm not a prize to be won or a weapon to be wielded. I'm the bridge, and I choose Atlas. She released the power then, letting it flow back into whatever deep place it had come from. The glow faded from her eyes, and exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, but Atlas was there instantly, catching her and Luna both, gathering them against his chest. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you both. Marcus snarled, and his warriors tensed, but the corrupt council members were backing away, their scheme fallen to pieces. One by one, Atlas's loyal wolves moved to surround them, and Amara saw the moment Marcus realized he'd lost. This isn't over, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. The legitimate council will have to verify. Then let them verify. Atlas's voice was steady, certain. Let every pack in the territories come and see. Amara is the Luna. The prophecy is real, and I'm the Alpha who chose her over everything, which means I'll stand beside her through whatever comes next. He meant it. Even now, even after seeing power that could freeze Alphas in their tracks, he wasn't afraid. He was proud. Marcus fled with his warriors, and the corrupt council members scattered like rats. Atlas's wolves secured the compound, and through it all, Atlas held Amara close, one hand cradling Luna, his warmth solid and real and safe. You gave up your crown, Amara whispered against his chest. Your pack. Everything. I gave up nothing that mattered. He pressed his lips to her hair. And I gained everything. You're not just mine, Amara. I'm yours. Completely. Forever. The exhaustion was dragging her under, but she smiled. Even though I apparently have terrifying ancient powers? Especially because of that. She felt him smile against her temple. My mate is legendary. How could I not be proud? Word of what happened in the neutral territory spread through the werewolf world like wildfire. Within a week, the legitimate High Council had summoned every alpha to the sacred gathering grounds, a massive clearing ringed by standing stones that had witnessed pack gatherings for centuries. Amara stood in the center of that clearing with Luna in her arms and Atlas at her side, facing down an assembly that included every major pack leader in the territories. The moon hung full and heavy overhead, bathing everything in silver light that made the standing stones seem to glow. Marcus stood among the gathered alphas, his face twisted with barely contained rage. This is a farce, he declared. Amara was my mate, bonded to Silvermoon. She carries my child. By law, she belongs. I belong to myself. Amara's voice rang clear across the gathering. You rejected me, Marcus. Before your entire pack, you severed our bond and cast me out. I accept that rejection, fully and finally. Whatever legal games you've tried to play, whatever corrupt council members you've bribed, it doesn't change the truth. You chose duty over love, and I am no longer yours. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Marcus's jaw clenched. The bond was never properly. The bond is broken because I say it is. Amara felt that ancient power stirring in her blood again, responding to her will. I am the Luna. I carry the authority of the First Mother, and I choose Atlas as my mate before all of you, before the moon, before every law and tradition you want to hide behind. She turned to Atlas, and his amber eyes shone with love so fierce it made her breath catch. I choose you, she said softly. Not because you're an alpha king, You're not anymore. Not because of your power or your pack or your name. I choose you because you chose me when it would have been easier to choose duty. Because you gave up everything to stand beside me. Because you're my mate in every way that matters. Atlas took her free hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. I choose you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I chose you over my crown, over my pack, over everything I thought defined me. And I'd make that choice again every single day for the rest of my life. This is unprecedented. One of the older alphas stepped forward. A rejected mate cannot what? Amara turned to face him, and she let the power show in her eyes just enough to make her point. Cannot choose her own path? Cannot claim the mate she actually loves? The traditions you're clinging to were made by wolves who never imagined a Luna would awaken. But I have, and I'm offering you all a choice. She released Atlas's hand and stepped forward, addressing the entire assembly. Luna had gone quiet in her arms, as if she sensed the importance of this moment. The war between Silvermoon and Bloodstone has raged for 20 years. Hundreds have died, families have been destroyed, and for what? Amara let her power unfurl, let it touch the consciousness of every wolf present. She wasn't commanding them, she was showing them memories buried in their collective history, truths that had been twisted over generations until they became legends, then lies. Your war was started by a false accusation, she said, her voice resonating with ancient authority. 23 years ago, a Silvermoon diplomat was murdered on Bloodstone land. Silvermoon blamed Bloodstone. Bloodstone claimed innocence. And the truth, the real truth, was buried. She pushed the memory forward, letting them all see it through her Luna vision. The Silvermoon diplomat meeting with a third party, Shadowfang rogues, already exiled and bitter. The setup, the murder, the planted evidence that had ignited a war between two great packs, while the real conspirators profited from the chaos. Gasps and growls rippled through the assembly. Some of the older alphas, the ones who'd been alive when it happened, looked stricken, seeing their certainties crumble. I could command peace, Amara said quietly. I have the power to freeze every one of you in place and enforce it. But that's not real peace. That's just control. So instead, I'm asking, choose. Continue the cycle of violence built on lies, or accept the truth and build something better. Silence fell over the gathering. Hundreds of wolves, dozens of alphas, all watching to see what would happen next. Atlas moved first. The former Alpha King of Bloodstone Pack walked forward and knelt before Amara, his head bowed. I pledge Bloodstone to peace, he said clearly. I acknowledge the Luna's authority. I accept the truth of our history, and I choose to end the cycle. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Damien stepped forward, newly crowned Alpha King of Bloodstone, and knelt beside Atlas. Bloodstone Pack honors this pledge, he said. We choose peace. One by one, other alphas followed. The smaller packs first, then the larger ones, until nearly every pack leader had taken a knee. The clearing filled with pledges of peace, of acceptance, of willingness to see past old hatreds. Marcus stood alone among the kneeling alphas, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. You're all fools, he spat, bowing to a rejected mate who carries more power than you'll ever understand. Atlas rose, and his voice was deadly calm. Who survived your rejection and found strength you can't imagine. Who offers you a place in this new world if you'll just accept it. Never, Marcus's eyes blazed. She's mine. The child is mine. I'll never. Then you're exiled. The voice came from an ancient she-wolf, one of the true council members. By the authority of this gathering, by the Luna's revelation of truth, by the testimony of dozens of witnesses to your crimes, conspiring with corrupt officials, attempting to kidnap and imprison the Luna. You are cast out from Silvermoon and from all Pack territories. You are alpha of nothing, Marcus. You have no pack, no land, no rights. You chose hatred over peace. Now live with that choice. Marcus's howl of rage split the night, but his own pack members stepped back from him, accepting the judgment. He fled into the darkness alone, and Amara felt nothing but pity for what he'd become. She turned to face the assembly, and Atlas returned to her side. "This is the beginning," she said, "not the end. We have work to do, generations of damage to repair, trust to rebuild, new systems to create. But we can do it, together." The pledges that followed were sworn under the full moon, binding and sacred. Packs that had been enemies for decades stood side by side. Wolves who'd lost family members to the war embraced those who'd fought on the other side. It wasn't perfect. There were still angry voices, still wolves who walked away rather than accept the change. But it was a beginning. As dawn approached, Atlas wrapped his arm around Amara's waist. "Luna Supreme," he murmured. "My mate, my love, how does it feel to change the world?" Amara looked at their daughter sleeping peacefully, at the gathering of wolves who'd chosen peace, at the man who'd given up everything to stand beside her. "It feels like coming home," she whispered. "Finally." 3 months later, Amara stood in a meadow decorated with flowers from every pack territory, wearing a dress that shimmered like moonlight, while Atlas waited at an altar carved from ancient stone. The ceremony was unlike any mating ritual before it, witnessed by wolves from dozens of packs, blessed by healers from all territories, officiated by the entire High Council. Amara was recognized as Luna Supreme and Atlas as her chosen mate. Not above her, not below her, but beside her, equal partners in building something new. When Atlas took her hands, his amber eyes shone with tears he didn't bother hiding. "I chose you over duty," he said, his voice carrying across the meadow. "But the truth is, you are my duty now. My heart, my future, my home. Choosing you was the easiest decision I ever made." Amara smiled through her own tears. "You taught me that love doesn't have to lose to duty, that sometimes the most important duty is love. I choose you, Atlas, today and every day." They sealed their bond before everyone, and the meadow erupted in howls of celebration. Wolves from Bloodstone and Silvermoon stood side by side. Former enemies drank and danced and celebrated together. Luna, blessed by every pack as the symbol of the new era, slept peacefully through most of it, safe in the arms of wolves who would protect her with their lives. That evening, as the celebration continued below, Atlas brought Amara to a quiet overlook. His hand rested on her belly, where new life grew, their child, conceived in love rather than duty, a symbol of everything they'd built. "Happy?" he asked softly. Amara leaned against him, watching the sun set over lands no longer divided by war. She'd been rejected, betrayed, hunted, and nearly broken. She'd discovered power she never knew she possessed. She'd changed the course of history. But more than any of that, she'd found a mate who chose her over everything, who stood beside her through impossible odds, who loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. "Extraordinarily happy," she said. Below them, wolves from every territory gathered in peace. The war was over, the cycle was broken, and Amara, once rejected and powerless, had become the Luna who united them all. With Atlas's arms around her and their future growing within her, Amara finally understood what the prophecy had meant. She'd bridged two worlds not through force, but through love, not through power, but through choice. She'd lost one alpha to duty, but she'd found another who chose love over everything, and together they'd built a world where no one had to choose at all. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Amara smiled. After everything, after the pain and fear and impossible odds, she'd found exactly what she'd been searching for since the moment Marcus rejected her. She'd found home,